Board members, I think we're probably, well, we're a little bit late, only by a few minutes, but if we can get you to take your seats, we'll get started. Is it Joel that's on the wire here?
Yes, Joel is on the phone and knows how to use his mute button.
Okay. Welcome, Board Member Wright.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, welcome, and those visiting today. Kind of a special day, isn't it? Supposedly the last big day on the Hill. It feels like it's been a marathon. Before we get started, I just want to thank staff and then also board members for all the work that's been happening this last month and a half. Feels like longer than that. Welcome and also thank you. If I could bring your attention to the agenda today, the first thing I'm looking for is a motion to approve the minutes for February 16th, February 23rd, and March 2nd. These are our 2017 board legislative meetings.
So moved, with a thank you to Lorraine for taking such copious notes.
Okay, we have motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Joel, that was an aye to approve.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Voting was unanimous. Okay, Angie, we're moving next to review of legislation. Let me get this on here. Okay.
Chair Huntsman, thank you. The next portion of and just to let you all know, we do anticipate a visit from Representative Steve Ellison. He asked the board today if he could come and present one of the bills that's actually on our agenda, SB 255, in person, and so he may be here shortly, at which time we'll probably stop the discussion and turn the time over to him. But as far as the legislative review, we've got kind of three portions of the legislative review that we were planning to go through with you. And first is an overall review of the budget and what has happened with the budget, so that you're aware of what's gone on in the last couple of weeks. Then we'll be giving you an update on the bills that have recently passed that we were watching, and give you an update on what happened with them, if they were subbed or amended, and kind of give you a report on those. And then we will last finish up with bills that are still in play that we're watching that you may have questions about. And as always, we are happy to discuss bills or issues that you would like us to discuss. So, Chair, I would recommend that you turn the time over to Deputy Superintendent Jones and Assistant Superintendent Grange to do the budget review first until Representative Ellison arrives. Okay.
Okay, both of you come forward.
And so I'll just, while they're getting set up, yesterday was the last Executive Appropriations Committee meeting. There were 3 items that will be included in the Bill of Bills. Some items that we were anticipating and others that we didn't know were going to be there. But essentially the Bill of Bills is the last bill that the legislature passes to kind of tidy up and take care of any appropriation and intent language that they need for all agencies, not just for public ed. And so in addition to the main public education base budget and then the public education amendments bills, sometimes public education items do end up in the Bill of Bills. And so are you both ready now to take over? Oh.
Hang on.
Okay.
Okay, I have both of your
Good.
mics on.
Okay, yep. This is Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, USBE staff. Just real quick, as Deputy Superintendent Stallings articulated, so executive appropriations met. What I first want to start off with is just, and what we're going to do is we're going to give you a little plastic sheet that basically summarizes all this, so you'll get it in a good handout type thing where you can just reflect and look at all the different programs, the different funding levels and things like that. So more coming as far as how much data and all that you need to move forward. But by way of comparison to previous years, all things considered, different programmatic pieces and parts and all the funding that was requested by the board as part of the what we call the Budgetary Procedures Act and the process of requesting different levels of funding, so to speak, whether it be for the WPU growth or programs, we've done quite well this year, and we should be, and so the staff are really grateful to everyone throughout this whole process, leading up to this last day, where we're, again, looking really good. So again, by way of comparison, this year we're looking at a 4% WPU increase. That's just phenomenal as far as, again, just comparatively with previous years. Growth was funded, if you recall that amount. So about a 1% WPU is about $28 million, okay? So if you take, $29 million and do 1%, 4% times, or you could even round up to 30 million if you want, is about $120 million. That's just great, comparatively to previous years. Then we can talk about the growth formula or the growth application. And so that's a total of 68 million, of which about 4 million, around 3.9 million, is going to make the educator salary adjustments this year. We always do that. And then the other key aggregate takeaway from the process, budget related, is that for the first time in many years, we're actually seeing a trend of more towards ongoing appropriations instead of one time. And so why is that important? Well, planning-wise, for any one of us, educators, budgeteers like myself and Assistant Superintendent Grange, when you're dealing in one-time appropriations, it's very difficult to plan out, beyond that 1 year, right? So now that we have these ongoing appropriations, and the LEAs will benefit from that in the sense that we'll be able to programmatically and systematically, not trying to sound like Travolta doing the grease lightning thing here, but anyway, programmatically and systematically, it's grease lightning, right? So here we go. Okay. Sorry, I'm just a real big fan of the movie Grease. So
Got chills.
Yeah. So anyway, that it does bring a certain amount of predictability to this process of the multitude of programs that we're funding, and great support from the legislature. Again, even across the board, but especially in this aspect of saying, okay, we recognize the importance of ongoing and proper planning and all that too. So. Again, we'll give you a list. Sorry about the orange color. That's what was given to us by Executive Approves, but the staff will put a more readable version of this for you. So I call your attention to the displays, and then Natalie, I'll turn it over to Natalie to talk about any of the specific programs that you would like. We can just kind of scroll down, let you get a sense of how much, but Natalie would be able to tell you at this point what has changed, which isn't too much, I don't think, on this sheet. So she'll do what we call brief by exception. Okay, she's gonna let you know what the exceptions are to these amounts that are on this sheet. So go ahead, Nat.
I think the only thing that we're aware of that I can remember off the top of my head is related to line 185. There was some amendments in either the Senate or the House that gave the State Board of Education $125,000 one time, and the remaining $250,000 stayed ongoing.
Will you state, for the people that are listening to this, not watching it, who you are?
Oh.
Please.
Yes. My name is Natalie Grange. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Financial Operations.
Thank you.
I think. I'm talking about line 185. On the orange sheet, there's lines down the left side. This is related to the Early Warning Matching Grant Program, which is associated with House Bill 404. Some of the interesting things about this sheet that was put out or approved by Executive Appropriations is that those funding amounts that are associated with bills can change clear up until midnight tonight. And so the one that I am aware of right now is House Bill 404. There was an additional $125,000 one-time money that was appropriated to the Board of Education. The $250,000 that's listed here is the ongoing amount that is intended for the grant program for LEAs. So there was some additional funds added to the office. I believe House Bill 43, which is not on this list, also changed a little bit today, but nothing substantial that was concerning to us. I think, as far as I can remember, there's nothing major. There was an additional $200,000, so not on this list, approved yesterday through executive appropriations, was about $200,000 to go into the special education program for a technology program related specifically towards autism. And that was really the only major change yesterday.
And we'll break out the specific, again, on that handy spreadsheet you'll have, we'll break these kind of details out, especially with this, what Assistant Superintendent Grange just mentioned was the autism things, these kind of later developments as we progressed towards this final day of the legislative session. I also want to, take a key takeaway from this is the fact that we were very well supported in the funding of the regional service centers. That ongoing appropriation plus the one-time appropriation really takes a lot of stress off of our own budget and all that too. So again, just can't express the gratitude towards our policymakers and the lawmakers for keeping those interests in mind and all that too, and letting us get our house in order and continuing down that line. So, and your great support too for towards these specific funding goals. So with that, if there's any questions or concerns or something that either myself or Assistant Grange, Superintendent Grange can answer, we'll go back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Jones. Any questions or comments from board members? If you turn your light on, while I'm waiting for some lights to turn on to comment on this. I just want to make sure that you know how, on the leadership side, and I think I can express the board too, but they can share their own opinion, and I appreciate all the work that's been done in working with these legislators to make this financial package potentially a reality. It looks like it's going to happen, so I guess you don't know until it's all over with tonight, but it's taken a lot of work, and for me personally, just my observation is really appreciate the commitment and dedication. I appreciate the invites to some of those early, really close to 7 a.m. starts here on the Hill, and then some of those nights, I know staff that have been here after 9 and 10, and I really appreciate that effort. And it is all good. It's good for education and good for kids. So thank you. We have Board Member Cummins.
Yes.
Did I say it right?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I definitely want to share my gratitude for all the hard work that's been done this session. It's amazing. I know that I don't do half of what you guys do, so I appreciate it. On the top of the spreadsheet, if I just could get some clarification at the very top, with ACT testing, replace SAGE with ACT, is that the ACT Aspire that we're talking about, or is that just with high school in general, the 9 and 10 testing?
ACT Aspire is 9-10, yes.
Okay, so that's
Yes,
177. Okay,
yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So that's the thing too, is through at the direction of the board and the superintendent, the sections were very good about identifying some potential solutions internally, so we may not have to come back and ask for as much. And we did that. We did that exercise, cost-benefit analysis and all that too, to where as we make changes in levels, and we can certainly do this in the future too, we looked internally first to try to make sure that we could apply cost-saving measures and all that to lessen the amount of the appropriation or ask that we'd come to the legislature with. And we'll continue to do that at your direction always. So.
Do you want to mention that UPass is in the total?
Yeah, and that's, so specifically to that, Assistant Superintendent Grange brings out, is that UPass was about $1.8 million that went down to the district. So collectively, we recommended to the board that it come back up into that so that we could offset the costs of the ACT in the future too. And in addition to that, the LFAs, legislative fiscal analysts, have agreed that we don't, or that we were allowed to do a calculation so we don't end up in what's called a flat appropriation. So, you know, when we enter into these types of things, programs like testing or anything like that, so oftentimes we'll enter into multiple year contracts, right? 3, 4, 5 years. Well, what's happened is in the past is we get an appropriation, you know, coming out of a legislative session, but over that 5-year contract, we'd grow, right? Maybe there's more test takers, less, whatever. So now what we've done is we've formulated for growth in our programs with it's basically a procurement strategy, right? To where, you know, at your approval, when you look at the consent calendar and we enter into these contracts, you'll see that we've you know, to the best of the ability, based on averages or something of student growth in particular grades, we've come up with a better process of trying to make sure that we have sufficient funding to apply to, in what we call in budget terms, the out years. You know, from that base year, we first received the funding, we've asked for incremental growth over that time in that initial appropriation. So we don't have to come back and say, oh, we need a supplemental, or oh, we need something like that. So much better detail and more precise in our funding applications.
Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. When I'm at home and I have 99 cents, I round to $1. But everybody keeps saying that the WPU is at 120,000, but it's 116. So my question is where the other 4 million or the other millions, has it been allocated, or is it just nebulous out there?
So,
Good question.
It's a good question. It's a topic of debate as part of the CDC process. Board staff calculate the value of the WPU out to the dollar. Legislative staff in the governor's office round. In doing so, there's a differential between generally what we say growth costs and what the LFA says growth costs. Part of that is a buffer for changes that may occur during the legislative session. So when this was initially published at 120,000, it was then reduced to 116. That's just the reduction of the buffer. I really wish I could answer where that money went, but until we see the bill of bills, I will not know. So I didn't get the clarity yesterday from EAC, and I would assume it has been given to someone. I didn't see anything in that magnitude on our budget, and so I'm not sure what happened to it.
Okay, follow up.
Okay, follow up.
So when will we get the bill of all bills? I can't remember. Today?
Today.
Is there a time frame on that?
It's
The House was still
today.
passing fiscal
Right.
bills this morning, and I
Okay.
believe that delays the bill of bills, and so, correct? We were working with the LFA last night to tie a few things out, and actually to answer a question or to hopefully get ahead of some information on the bill of bills. One of the major initiatives that we've been working on this year is reorganizing our appropriations so that funding actually goes to the appropriate place. When the bill of bills comes out, you will see the reorganization in that bill, I'm told. It is a little bit scary looking, so please don't panic. We're checking that. Effectively, no funds have been moved or taken away or sent somewhere else. We're just directing them into the appropriate line items and places where they're being expended or where the effort is being maintained. But we are very carefully watching and checking that so that nothing happens to those funds. But I didn't want you to be concerned about what that was when you saw it.
And thank you. And thank you for your hard work on this.
Okay.
So, if I may, Mr. Chair, what this does, what Natalie just stated, is it puts us further on the road to that cost culture and the cost center approach, so that we, as your staff, can come to you and say, well, this is the money, this is what it was intended to be spent on, it is being spent on that, or it's not, and also what the outcomes are. We're definitely, and even a lot faster than I thought we would, through the efforts of your staff, and I'm talking not myself, I'm talking the staff below me. Their efforts have meant getting us into this finance faster than we thought we would, and we're just making awesome progress towards really being able to give that finite detail to you as decision makers on what's working and what's not, strictly from a funding perspective. I'll always speak to that. There's always the programmatic side, but we'll be able to tell you what it's costing, where the money's being spent, and then you can make decisions on, well, maybe we should reduce the travel or the frequency of this or different things like that. It's going to be great.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the finance side of it? I have a question for Deputy Superintendent Jones. We see the light at the end of the tunnel, like tonight.
And it's not a train, sir, coming towards us, so
Yeah.
it's looking really good.
It looks really good, but there's definitely some takeaways that
Sure.
there's some changes that we've made this year on the financial side and approach. I know Emily and a bunch of people have been engaged in those changes, but there's certainly some takeaways. Is there an opportunity, or are you going to take that opportunity post legislative session here to say, okay, what are the betterments we can
Sure.
certainly put in place? Can you speak to any of that? And
Yes, so under the direction of, or at the direction of the superintendent, we'll conduct for lack of a better term, kind of an after-action review. Like, what was supposed to happen, what were we trying to get, what did actually happen, what processes worked, what didn't, all that. We would be able to summarize that for you and then make recommendations on, this is good, we should look to do this, meaning like have certain people in certain meetings, or, look through the process of how early we put in like specific requests, details behind those requests and what we were intending to get or to seek from that too. So it's kind of in that format of like an after-action review or something that we can really display to you or present to you so that you as decision makers can say, let's keep this, let's try this differently this year with as we progress. Because right after this, when you convene in May, I'm going to start talking about, state fiscal year 19 and getting all the asks in and all that too. So we're really coming into a very good rhythm. So yes, we'll provide that level of detail. Does that answer your question, sir?
yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments? Well, we have. Well, we'll excuse you and we'll go back to.
Representative Ellison has arrived.
I thought I saw him come in. So can you bring up Senate Bill 255 on the screen and want to welcome Representative Ellison here today.
Thank you.
You're
Pleasure to be with you today. Appreciate you working me in.
No problem.
I wanted to talk about SB 255, which there's several versions out on the system, but I want to talk about the fifth substitute. So this is a bill that is kind of a combination of SB 80 and the original SB 255, and it's pretty straightforward. It does two things. It addresses the equity pupil unit for what we've kind of used the term the low-lying districts that have a harder time raising sufficient funding from their property tax base. Similar to SB 97 several years ago that Senator Aaron Osmond sponsored, that brought in $75 million of new money into the system to, again, address the equity issue. You're probably familiar with SB 80 that did not make it out of committee, that tried to bring the equity pupil unit up by earmarking future growth in the education fund. There was some controversy with that mechanism. That bill, though, is dead. However, SB 255 has been amended to include still the equity pupil unit issue, however, with a different funding mechanism. The second part of the fifth substitute of SB 255 would freeze the statewide basic levy for 5 years. The fiscal note is approximately $22 million a year for 5 years, and so would bring in approximately, per the fiscal note, about $100 million, 110 over the next 5 years to address the equity pupil unit. This bill passed the Senate on a vote of, the final vote was 25-2, so very, very broad support. The bill ran out of time to have a House hearing. However, it is expected that the bill will be loaded to the House's third reading calendar for Senate bills by the end of the day. If not, then it won't matter, but that is the the commitment that has been made. Representative Brad Last is the actual House sponsor of the bill, and he'll be presenting it. He was trying to make it here for this meeting also. But I would strongly encourage the state school board to take a position of support on this bill. I know there's been some confusion about what's actually in the bill and exactly what it does, but this does address fundamental issues of funding, and instead of the SB 80, which simply rearranged the deck chairs, this brings new chairs, shall we say, onto the boat. We're not talking about the Titanic here. That's different. It's different. Just to clarify. So I believe that I know for one, my local district, Canyons District, had opposed SB 80, but now stands in support of SB 255. I believe the Superintendent's Association also supports it. If I'm misspeaking, I would definitely ask them to correct me, but that's my understanding. So that's really the presentation about the bill and the request. It'll be, I'm not under any illusion this will be an easy bill to get through the House, but if it goes through the House as easy as it did the Senate, then yeah, it'll be quick, but I think maybe the House is just not quite as up to speed about the bill as maybe the Senate was. If the school board doesn't support it, then I think it does present a difficult message about the willingness to address some of our fundamental funding problems, but of course that's the prerogative of the board if that's their feeling. So that's my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. We have quite a few questions or comments. We'll start off with Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. I actually appreciate the inventiveness of putting these two together and trying to find funding and the equitability, but I actually want to make a motion. May I do that and then have discussion? I'd like to make a motion that the board support 255 in its, and substitute what? 905 and substitute 5. Thank you, Representative.
So we have a motion and a second. We'll go to discussion. I have a couple lights on. They're still on, so I'm sure they want to discuss something to this motion. We'll start with Vice Chair Ellis. It's not yet, but it will. There you go.
Okay, now it's solid. Can you explain to me the differences between the equalization of funding in this version versus Senator Fillmore's bill, please?
Yes. Under SB 80, the funding mechanism was to earmark approximately 1/3 future growth in the was it the education fund or the WPU? It was in the income. It was in the income tax, so in the education fund, effectively, to pay for the equalization, which that's definitely an option. I can tell you that the legislature is grappling with similar decisions we've made in the past in the transportation fund, where we earmarked growth in the general fund to pay for transportation issues, which is, some would say, coming back to haunt us now. So if SB 80 had become law, the effect would be to take 1/3 off of the top going forward, which would make it difficult to fund. Obviously, it's always going to be dependent on what the revenue numbers are for any particular year, but it makes it very difficult to probably achieve realistic WPU expectations.
Okay.
One fact that I think is very important to note here, if you go back in the past 100 years in our state, the average recessionary cycle, and this largely mirrors the country, is a 7-year cycle. The longest cycle that we've ever had from peak to peak is 10 years. We are now 7-8 years past the last recession. And so our economists are telling us that basically in the next roughly 2 years, if we don't have another recession, we will shatter a 100-year record since they basically began collecting data. So just the reason I say that is if that happens and SB 80 had been in effect, and let's just say we had a year of no growth, and we've already earmarked some of the money. Let's just say we had a little bit of growth and we earmark it. That pretty much ties the hand of the Public Education Appropriations Committee. And so that's another reason why I think this is important.
I have a follow-up too. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Do you have a follow-up?
I have a follow-up and a little bit of a statement. In general, I'm actually opposed to the idea of equalizing funding, and I'll explain why. In some districts where they're more self-funded, I feel like sometimes at the state level we put down so many requirements similar to what the federal government is doing to the state. And so as a citizen, like in my district where we don't take as much state funding, I have this hope that at some point we'll say, you know what, the requirements are too much and we're gonna break free and we're gonna set our own course because we're really funding education on our own. And so I wanted to ask you what this will do to a district like Park City that doesn't really take any funding, and Wasatch County that does, versus Alpine. I mean, Wasatch takes just a small amount of state funding relative to other districts like Alpine that takes a large portion. So what does this do to an individual district's funding? And I just want to make sure we don't have we're not making it harder for districts to break the bands of bureaucracy.
That's a good question. I actually come from a similar perspective where my district is, my understanding, will not benefit from this bill. Now under SB 80, they would have been punitive. However, from my time as the chair of Public Education Appropriations Committee, I had to put my state hat on instead of just my individual district hat. And this in no way actually equalizes it statewide.
Okay.
It simply takes us up another tranche from where we were with SB 97. I apologize, there's actually a graph that lists it by district. I will actually try, I don't have it with me, but I will try and quickly obtain a copy and circulate to the board before you adjourn so you can see. But I can tell you right now that there is one of our 41 districts, there is one that is not like the others. And of course that is Park City District, and they are leaps and bounds above the other districts.
And I cover both entities. I cover 7 districts. So I cover both angles. So I'm not, just trying to look at one, but I do see the concerns in one. And so I just would like to,
I will circulate that, and you can see it by district, and you can see what it does incrementally.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a step in the right direction, but it's not the total resolution of the issue.
Thank you.
Okay. There's still 3 other questions and maybe comments to you. We'll go next to Board Member Cummins.
So my concern was the same as Vice Chair Ellis, concerns about the redistribution of the wealth, how it gets accumulated and then distributed. now, with SB 80, I had asked prior, how does that get spread? And where does that money stay? Does it stay within the district, or will it then be appropriated throughout the whole state?
Good question. The chart that I will supply you will show by district how it would be distributed. It will, because it will go, I'm not sure the exact mechanism, I understand the fundamentals of how it works, but what it would do is be, and I'm not sure if it first flows to the education fund and into the restricted account or directly into the restricted account, details that aren't substantive to the discussion, but they will end up in a restricted account that would, and again, this sunsets in 5 years. That's an important point to make. For those 5 years, it would go into this restricted account and then be distributed to those districts that are the lower lying districts that just really don't have the ability on their own to raise those extra funds from their property tax base. Not so much a matter of effort, but really comes down to their ability to do it.
Okay, may I
One follow-up. We'll have one
Thank
follow-up on each. We still have three
Is there
more.
still, thank you, Chair, is there still an incentive from the state for districts to raise taxes, property taxes in this bill?
I don't
Like
believe
a
so. I will
matching?
let, we're calling an expert to the stand.
To answer the question that you had before, when this turns green, to answer the question that you had before, effectively the distribution mechanism is that the voted and board guarantee programs are allowed, the amounts that we guarantee will raise by 2 increments every year, up to a cap of 38. So there are lots of districts right now who already have levied a board levy, right? Way in excess of what's being guaranteed. And so straight out of the gate, they have plenty of room to grow in this trajectory of growth so that the funds could be distributed to them. There is a cap of 38 increments between the 2 levies. And so just depending upon how LEAs and local boards make those decisions. As far as the funding mechanism and the distribution mechanism, it works a little bit like, exactly like Senate Bill 97 did a couple of years ago. Effectively what happens is we freeze the basic rate, which will be a little bit higher than what we had tentatively planned this year in order to generate the money to pay for the fiscal note. That is revenue that's collected at the local level. Because we don't need as much state money to pay for the basic program because there's more local money available, that state money goes into a restricted account, and that restricted account is what funds the additional increases to the increments on the guarantee. Maybe that didn't answer any questions.
Okay, we're going to move to Board Member Hanson. Oh, is it Brittany? Oh, okay. I've got the light shows. Okay.
Thank you for coming, Representative. I'm very supportive of the concept of this bill. I have a technical question. When you were speaking about that peak to peak, it seems to me right now we're kind of at the top of one of those peaks as far as property values go. And so if this is frozen for 5 years and we're capping it at kind of, because if I understand the basic rate, it's revenue driven, right? And so right now the actual rate is going to be low because the revenue is high at a peak. Is that correct? Correct me if I make any mistakes in my understanding.
Yes.
Okay. And so we're basically freezing it at a time when the rate is actually quite low. And so I'm curious about when you have a fiscal note of $22 million a year, are we confident that is going to maintain? Because if property values drop in the next year or two because I'm guessing a bubble-ish type place, are we actually going to lose funding because that rate is frozen at a low place?
I was hoping somebody would ask that question. Not really. It's a great question. I'm going to let Natalie answer that one.
Yeah, so the basic as it's frozen as a floor. I mean, functionally how the basic is calculated is there's a whole group of people that get together and estimate what assessed valuations are, and then based on that, the rate floats up or down, right? Of course, at the time that the estimate is made, they're all estimates, right? The mechanism in the bill actually has us calculate, or the Tax Commission certifies a rate to pay for the cost of the basic program, the $75 million that was part of Senate Bill 97 a couple of years ago, and then whatever the incremental piece is of this bill. So next year, that incremental piece will be $22 million. In fiscal year 19, that incremental piece is $44 million, and it grows up to the 110 at the end of the 5. The economists, and we've had lots of conversations as to whether that would be enough. The rate has been floating down over the past couple of years because values have been going up. There's always the risk, and that risk exists right now with Senate Bill 97 and the way that it was passed, that if we don't have sufficient funds to fund all those three pieces, it could require a devalue of the WPU. It could also be funded through money in the income tax or the education fund, and I believe that we would know about that in sufficient time for the next session to address it. So there's always a risk when setting the assessed or the basic rate that we'll run into problems if there's a decline. I think that this adds one more element or one more level of complexity, but that's a risk that already exists.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, because they meet every year to set that basic rate, if there are storm clouds ahead, they could then adjust that rate every year.
Yes, and we do adjust the rate every year. That's one of the areas that's addressed by the Common Data Committee and the Tax Commission.
Okay, do you have a follow-up?
So then we're not actually freezing the rate, we're increasing the revenue that's going to be available through the basic rate?
So the rate just can't fall below the double, I think it's still double 1675, is that right? That's the last one I remember seeing. I'm not sure what sub that was in. So the rate just can't fall below that. So if it turns out when all the calculations are completed that the rate only needed to be double 1597, the double 1675, that extra incremental money would then go into the basic program, and those funds would stay within the basic program as part of the carryover. As part of the mechanism of funding this, those dollars are taken out at the very beginning on July 1 in order for us to help give the LEAs amounts that they can budget and spend. That state money that we essentially save goes into that restricted account and we start paying the LEAs in July. So it's a two-way street. I mean, if the values are too low, if assessed values are too low and we don't yield enough money, that's a problem either way. If the assessed valuations are higher and the rate would have been a lot lower had we not frozen it, all of that extra revenue goes into the basic program and stays in the basic program. So it's a teeter-totter either way.
Okay. Board Member Reby.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that you worked with all of the people in the schools to make this a bill that they liked and they could accept. So thank you so much for your time.
We didn't want to wait till the last minute to do it, though.
Thank you.
Okay. No follow-up on that, then?
Oh, thanks again.
Okay. Board Member Cannon.
Thank you. I appreciate these questions because this is a funding bill, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand the funding. So I'm looking at the fiscal note here, and it's talking about $20 million. And I guess I understand Senator Stevenson's bill was all about freezing that rate and allowing it not to drop. My concern is, where did Fillmore's bill come in, and is this $20 million going to be used for the purposes, the Robin Hood purposes, so to speak, that he's interested in, or is there more money? Can you just try to clarify that for me?
Yes. Before I forget, I do want to mention this bill is on the bill tracking sheet for the Utah Taxpayers Association and is supported by them. So it's a group that a lot of legislators look to sometimes for advice, so just thought I'd mention that. So in SB 80, the component that people generally didn't like was the, as Senator Stevenson called it, the reverse osmosis wall between public ed and higher ed. That would have capped the amount that could flow from the general fund from the education fund into the general fund, or vice versa for higher ed, was going to cap that at its last rate, I believe. That wasn't very popular because it didn't address funding, having a replacement funding mechanism for higher ed for potential growth. So that's why that bill, I believe, went down in the Senate committee. Not because of I think clearly we can say it wasn't because of the freezing the basic rate, because that, as it got put into to 255, then sailed through the Senate. So on the funding mechanism, like I said, under the original 80, it was just rearranging future or existing funding, not bringing any new money into the system, and hence the contention amongst the districts. And actually, I don't think to my knowledge, I don't believe any districts supported that. And the Superintendent's Association didn't support it because it was basically just, fighting over the same dollars and what pot they were going to go in. This one does bring additional dollars in, and you'll see from the chart that I supply you, but I believe it's the vast majority of districts will benefit from additional funding. You'll be able to see it on the chart that I bring in, but to the question of, Robin Hood, we have a state-funded system, and it's a group ran into trouble with that in one of my committees the other day because they didn't like certain money flowing out of their particular municipality for a certain program. And so I asked them if they wanted to just cut the formula then for sales tax, which they were benefiting from greatly. And they couldn't answer that because that's how we work as a state, as the ultimate political municipality, shall we say, that we try to send it out equally and then let the districts do with it as they please. I have to get one little just jab in here. We take great pride in how we send it out to the districts, and I believe this bill is another step to do it equally. I think we're one of only 2 states in the nation that have not been sued for our distribution of funding on an equalized basis. However, I know from personal experience by digging into some districts' books that once that money arrives at the districts, it can flow out very, very unequally to the schools in those districts. So I'm planning next session to run a bill that will require all districts to submit data to the Utah Transparency Database that simply lists funding per school, number of students per school, average funding per student per school by type of school, K through 6, middle, or high school, which it'll be a pure transparency bill, no fiscal note to it, but I think that will just help citizens better understand how the money is being spent at the local level. But that's a side note. Sorry, I just had to get that in.
Follow up. So this fiscal note is for $20 million, and it looks like there's some in one time, and then that goes to restricted revenue. Is that the amount that will be divvied up equally in the Robin Hood type portion, or are we talking more dollars than that? I'm trying to understand what the fiscal note means.
That is roughly the amount per year. So over the 5-year period, it's roughly $110 million. The restricted account is so it's not distributed completely equally across the state because, again, we're trying to bring districts more into equilibrium, and if we just distributed it on the WPU method, we would just exacerbate the current problem that we have. So hence the restricted account. Am I correct, Natalie?
Yeah, I think one thing that I would add is that the distribution mechanism is the voted and board guarantee program, and the elements that go into that formula are the local property taxes that are collected by each district, and that's based on the assessed valuations in the district and the rates they choose to charge, right? And then the number of students. And so depending upon how big your schools are, how big your LEA is, and then the rates that you choose to charge and the property that you have in your district, you have a different funding mix or a different picture. And so the guarantee program aims to kind of equalize that, or make it more equitable. I don't think equal is the right word, but make it more equitable. And that funding mechanism was in place before the session. It's been in place for as long as I've been around. This just adds additional dollars to that funding mechanism, and then also increases the guarantees, which is not something that or the amount of the rate that is guaranteed. Right now, LEAs charge rates for their voted and board levies, and not 100% of those rates are guaranteed, only portions. Jamie will yell out the right answers, but one of the rates is guaranteed at 444. Is that board? Board is 444 and voted is 16. Those amounts that we guarantee will raise each year. And so, as I indicated with the board, I think every LEA is already charging far in excess of 444 or 444, way in excess of 444. And so, straight out of the gate, without having to do anything, they'll be able to harness or receive more distributions based on local effort that they're already contributing.
Thank you.
And lastly, I just want to say I think it is a very fundamental policy question that I don't think people opposed SB 80 because of the equalization formula. I think most people would say a child in Tintic district has a constitutional right to a free and appropriate public education just as much as a child in Park City District. Ironically, I haven't done the math, but I bet you could choose 12 properties in Summit County, and they may equal the complete assessed property value in a place like Tintic District. And so it is a fundamental question of do we want children to be treated equally? The controversy with the first bill was with 80 was the higher ed component, and with the original 255 first draft was the funding mechanism. I believe this brings both parts together in a package that everybody can live with.
Okay. What we're doing is we're speaking to a motion that was seconded to support SB 255 sub number 5. So just to let people know where we're at on this, we're going to go to Board Member Bolter.
Okay, so this is probably just a simple yes or no answer. Then I have a follow-up, but does this bill incentivize districts to raise taxes?
I don't believe it does. Natalie?
I don't think I'm allowed to answer those questions. I think that in the first year, because this increase or the increase in the increments, as I indicated, all LEAs already are far and above assessing, with the rates that they're assessing now, that they could access the additional funds, at least on the board side. I think ultimately, as we get closer to that 38 cap, it could, if LEAs decide they want to access more of those guarantee funds, they would need to raise their taxes. But I think in the next fiscal year, there's plenty of room in the board levy and the voted levy as well to access the funds that are available.
So right now, it wouldn't incentivize them, but later on, it possibly could.
You guys agree?
I'm guessing.
Is that fair? Yeah, I think the first couple of years, there's so much room in the cap that it probably wouldn't make much of a difference.
My follow-up, different districts have different programs, so are we taking into account the cost that it takes districts to run programs, or are we just going to redistribute the funds equally among districts and not taking that into account? And also, like Park City is a big district compared to other smaller districts that have a small amount of students. And so sometimes it looks like Park City receives a lot more funds, but they just have a lot more children. And so I'm wondering if you're going to take that in. A lot larger
property base, tax base, not necessarily more children.
So I'm just wondering, though, as you redistribute the funds, are you going to look at the type of programs each district has and what it costs, or are you just going to equally redistribute?
There's nothing in here to evaluate the, shall we say, general control and supervision of the district. This is just based on pure formulas.
Okay. And the formulas are in statute, so it's not provided for in the bill. Okay.
As promised, the chart is coming around, so.
Okay, next, you had your follow-up, right?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Vice Chair Ellis.
Okay, it's great now. Thank you for entertaining our questions. I appreciate it. And Michelle asked the reason I put my mic on, but I'm just a little confused, I guess, because this is the same chart that we saw with Senator Fillmore's bill.
The key is that the money to fund it is coming from new revenue, not from future WPU. Okay. So the mechanism is the same. Have you seen the chart on the back? I don't think you've seen this.
No,
for those of you that get into regression analysis, you're going to like this. It's left y-axis is average teacher compensation, x-axis is assessed valuation per student, just for 14 and 15, and it is interesting to see how those assessed valuations generally work in a linear fashion. I mean, it should be no surprise that if you have greater resources to supplement your budget with, you're going to be able to more effectively be able to pay your teachers. And I think a number of those districts that are struggling to fill existing teaching positions, some of which are going unfilled, are definitely on that lower range of the assessed value, which this bill will certainly help to address.
Do you have a follow-up?
Well, no, I probably should just keep this in my head.
Okay, very good.
I have a lot of those thoughts myself.
We're going to Board Member Lear.
Representative Ellison, because you mentioned it, this is not exactly to the bill, but because you mentioned equality and equity and what you might do next year, I hope you would also consider, in the spirit of transparency, the word of the hour, that different districts have the students in different districts have different needs, and because I represent Salt Lake, though it has a pretty solid tax base and a very manageable numbers of students, unlike Alpine, for instance, but it has more extreme needs. It has 50 ethnicities in every school. It has more extreme disparity between families in the district. It has a lot of mobility. And I think if we're really trying to be transparent about equality and equity, that your kind of chart would also demonstrate those, so that people can see the kinds of students and families we're serving.
I think it would be, if I can respond to that.
You bet.
I don't know if I heard a question, but I'll...
There wasn't a question. I was just asking that you...
I'll certainly consider. I think it would be helpful to have both qualitative and quantitative data.
Sure.
So, for instance, I went down and toured Washington Elementary, which if I stood on the top of the rotunda, I might be able to hit with a Frisbee.
Right.
20% of the children are homeless.
Right.
And they're achieving far above average results at that elementary school.
Right.
It was extremely encouraging. I went down there with the governor. And so I think it would be helpful to have a spot where districts could, we're not going to be comparing district to district. This is really just to compare within a district. So somebody can say, why are the children in this elementary funded at, twice the rate as the children in this elementary? And if they say, well, we feed them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and, we have interpreters on staff, or a higher proportion of children with disabilities, they could explain that. And this is nothing to change how a district distributes it, but frankly, the district I work with to do this, I think were kind of surprised when they looked at some of the numbers. And I think one of the biggest drivers of it is when teachers with little experience, or new teachers that are gaining experience, maybe is a better way to put it, leave a difficult school in search of a school where they may not have as many challenges, which I don't blame them 1 second for, but maybe the district would say, if our stage scores in that school are lower and the average teacher tenure there is lower and we're spending less there, maybe we want to redistribute our funds differently and put greater incentives to serve some of those children at the bottom of the kind of educational spectrum.
Yeah,
but thank you.
I just think those are important.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the little digression there.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other...
Mark,
Yes?
this is Carol. I just wanted to let Lorraine know I'm on.
Carol, you're on.
Yes.
Do you know that you're on, you've got an open mic?
I don't know any other way to work my phone.
Okay, but do you have a question to the motion to support?
Yeah, no, I just needed to tell Lorraine I was on. I don't know how to do that.
Okay, well, you just did, so you're on with Board Member Wright. So what's before us is a motion to support SB 255, substitute number 5. I'm not seeing any further discussion, so let's vote on it. All in favor say aye. Those opposed? Will the nays, or no, with the ayes, raise your hand. Okay, who's on the phone? Are you in favor? Please state your name.
Carol Stein.
Joel Wright abstains as well.
You're abstained? Or you support?
Joel Wright does not vote.
Okay. Okay. So, what was Terrell?
Carol's an aye.
An aye. So we'll go around. Scott? Laura? Spencer's not here. Michelle? No. Lisa? No. Elisa? Mark? Aye. Brittany? Aye. Okay, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions that anyone has for the representative? Well, thank you.
Then I'm getting out of here.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome to stick around if you'd like.
Okay. We'll see if we can go past this bill.
Okay, Deputy Superintendent Stallings, you're back up.
Will you? Thank you. All right. And I've asked Tiffany Stanley, your policy advisor, to join me at the table to help us go. The two of us will be going through some bills and giving you an update on what has been happening. So I'm just going to pull up my list here and give you an update on some of the bills that you, do you want to pull up 92? Of some of the bills that recently passed that the board has been watching and had taken motions on. The first one is HB 92, physical restraint in public schools, I think, or in schools. And this bill, as you recall, the board took a vote to support this bill, and it did pass both the House and the Senate, and is now on its way to being enrolled. There was an amendment, and you can, I think Linda deserves a lot of credit for working on this bill along with Glenna and I, and I think you were there for every step of the way, right? Yep. Even in the gallery when it passed the Senate. And then there was one amendment, can you stop right there? The only amendment's pretty minor that was made over in the Senate is to just clarify that this law applies to students who are under the age of 19 and receiving educational services, or for those students with disabilities under the age of 23. And part of that was because students often turn 18 or they turn 22 while they're still receiving services, and then they finish out the semester. So HB 92 has passed. If there are any questions or if there's anything you would like me to stop and change course on, please let me know. The next bill is HB 136, and that's the bill Board of Education revisions that Representative Kennedy ran, and Tiffany's going to just give an update on that one.
So, yes, this is the bill that the board did take a position of opposition to. Since that time, the shall was changed to a may, so it authorizes the board to, before prioritizing the implementation of a future federal goal, objective, program need, or accountability system that does not directly and simultaneously advance a state goal, objective, program need, or accountability system, the board may determine the financial impact of failure, and so on. I think you all are familiar with this one.
All right. The next bill is HB 168, and I'll pull that one up if you want to start talking about that.
So this is the kindergarten supplemental enrichment program. So this passed yesterday. The board took a motion of support. So it appropriates for kindergarten supplemental enrichment, or sort of like optional enhanced kindergarten, $2.8 million, which I'm told about 60 schools qualify based on this criteria, where it's 10% IGP or 50% free or reduced lunch. So that'd be about 1,500 students. And then there's some money appropriated for the kindergarten readiness assessment. I think that's...
Yep. The next bill, while you're pulling up 212. I will talk about HB 413. That's the Public School Membership and Associations, or the High School Activities Association bill. That one was also amended in the Senate to include the word athletic in the definition of association to hopefully eliminate its applicability to other organizations or associations that may govern student association or interscholastic activity in non-athletic activities. And as you may remember, this bill also appropriates $15,000 to the board so that the High School Activities Association can seek reimbursement from us for the costs of their independent appeals panel. So, and then HB 212. Oh.
Thanks, Brittany. Chair Pro Tem. I just wanted to state on the record about House Bill 413 a couple of things that I feel like the opportunity will pass. This might be the last chance I have. First of all, I am pleased that the association finds this alternative acceptable. I'm glad that that was worked out. I do want to state that I find that it's very interesting that this is touted as a great transparency bill for the public, when the discussion of the bill started in secret, was carried out in a closed discussion where board members weren't invited and the public wasn't. There were 2 board members invited, that was all. It didn't involve the full board, and I think that inviting the full board to that discussion would have been more appropriate. I think there were also a limited number of members of the Board of Trustees that were invited, so I really don't like the process that started this bill. I don't like the notion this is about transparency when it was everything but as the procedure progressed. I also have a reservation about 3 paid committee members making final decisions for quasi-public bodies or entities, which is what ends up happening. These paid committee members will make final decisions about any kinds of, and the laundry list is pretty broad. It says questions. It says, and I think transfers are one of the concerns, but nobody really wanted that responsibility except the High School Activities Association, from whom it was taken. So I think that was this solution that was decided by this committee, but I have my reservations about that. I think it really should be a recommendation to some governmental entity. So I just wanted to express that. I don't think there's any point taking a vote at this juncture, but I don't like the way that this bill came about. So thanks for letting me say that.
Light is out. Okay, carry on.
One thing I just wanted to point out on lines 253 and 254 is that the appeals panel actually will only hear appeals related to transfers. If you look at lines 253 and 254. Okay. Yeah, they are supposed to establish a uniform procedure for hearing and deciding all kinds of things. That would be up to their internal process, so they could continue to use the process they're already using, if they'd like. If they wanted to use this external appeal panel, they could do that also, but the only thing that this statute addresses is allowing, or essentially stating, that the association shall allow an individual to appeal let me just read it. An individual may appeal to an appeals panel established in this section an association decision regarding a request to establish eligibility after a student transfers schools. So if they wanted to use it for other things, and if they wanted to handle the other disputes, they could do that in another way if they'd like. So. Okay.
I acknowledge that is narrower than I stated, but I still have the same concern. It's still a public education student decision that I feel like should be handled by nobody who really wants to take it on. So that's why we're paying people to do it, which I I have some legal concerns about appropriate delegation of responsibilities. Just duly
Yeah.
noted.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make that one slight, for the record, yeah. Great, so move to 212?
Oh, sure. So this is what was the official title? Incentive for Effective Teachers in High Poverty Schools?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got it.
Sorry, and I just moved it from where you had
So
it.
since the board took a position of support on this one, there was an amendment, I believe it was after that, that requires local or the LEA to pay half of the salary bonus. So, and also the fiscal note got cut, so it's $250,000. We would expect that to cover about 90 because of the match, and also because the salary bonus is 5,000 plus retirement and Medicare, so probably around 90 teachers. And I think when we estimated how many would qualify, it was between 80 and 120, so in the ballpark.
Great. Then quickly, HB 239, Juvenile Justice Amendments, that bill passed to, yeah, sorry.
So just this morning when I was discussing this with some teachers, we were confused about high poverty schools. Is that what it says? Schools and states declare different high poverty schools and Title I schools. Is this going to be declared by the state or declared by the LEA?
So the definition of high poverty school is more than 20% of the enrolled students are IGP, or 70% are free and reduced.
Okay.
So that's the definition.
So any school that falls within this rate can, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Board Member Lear?
And as long as we're here for a minute, I wondered what did the appropriation start out as, and then what did it start at? Do you recall?
It would have been the state paying the full amount plus the benefits, so it was like 670 something.
Yeah, right around there.
Which is, I just have to say, this was my initial concern the very first time Representative Winder came here, and this did turn into something different than what the board supported, and I just think that that's worth noting, that the amount of money became very much smaller, and I'm not so sure I would have been so supportive if it had not, if we'd seen the end from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't particularly like the outcome. I guess we're the abused spouses that accept that, but okay. I just think that that's worth noting.
Okay. Board Member Hanson?
And I have to say I really like this bill. It's innovative. I think it's worth trying. I think he's committed to working on getting more incentives for lower grades if it works. And so I think it's one of the positive things. I think I like it when people think out of the box. And I really, really appreciate the fact that he did that with this. And I think we'll see how it goes. It'll be interesting to see.
Okay.
All right, is it back to us?
Very good. Before it goes back to you,
Mm-hmm.
if I might, are you in the middle of one, or
Keep
can I move
going.
to another?
No, you're more than welcome to take.
This is a little bit hot off the press. I'd like to update the board on House Bill 291. As you're aware, we voted against it. We wanted to be involved in some conversation and make some recommended changes. We've been engaged in that. We've had several substitutes. The latest substitute that I've seen with with my eyes, has been substitute number 3. It's now going to substitute 4, and in between board meetings, myself and the superintendent have had quite a few discussions on addressing our concerns with the bill, and there's been kind of an evolution process that's been taken place. Right now, on the 4th substitute, that's not out, it's being drafted, and I've got permission to talk about it because I think this is really important. And that is, I don't know if you recall the bill, but it had the bill for this position that was talked about in 291. It made things retro back to January 1. Right now, what is being proposed is July 1st, which I believe is a good thing. The second part of this is the 4-year term. It's a 4-year term instead of a 6, and then you can serve more than one term, which real clear, and this is on the operational side, and this is where I've spent, and the superintendent have spent, and staff have spent a lot of time on this, is the title will no longer, if this goes through in the 4th substitute, the individual or the position that was previously talked about was the director will now become the beneficiary advocate, not the director. Okay? That means the staff that's the beneficiary advocate has access to staff and that, but all of the staff that happens to be in that section works for the Board of Education. Okay? Also included in this substitute 4 is a meaningful termination criteria, which includes insubordination and not following written directives. It also includes a due process requirement that supports producing facts and not hearsay for termination, and actually gives the board a lot of protection with this unique position. And so this is kind of the Reader's Digest version, and there's still a lot of work happening behind the scenes on this 4th substitute. Myself and the superintendent, we have been really clear that the board has not taken an issue on this, but we are aware of board concerns, where we've heard the concerns over this bill, and we've been moving forward in trying to address those concerns in this House Bill 291. Now, this is unique, and I'm not sure if I can even do this, but because I don't have it in front, this is what's awkward, is it's not in, I can't, it's being printed out, I mean, it's being changed, a lot of people are on this, and there's this evolution, and I don't have it before you, and so I'm asking in good faith that I will do what you will want me to do in moving this forward. What I would like is to have your support in continuing this, working on this substitute, addressing the concerns and issues that you have, and as an end result of this 4th substitute, be in a supportive role, because in my personal opinion, as I'm going through this, we as a board are in a better, believe it or not, a better place. And so this is unique. I don't know. I haven't been here. Has anyone been here before where we don't get to have you read everything on it? So that's where I'm at. So is there And again, this discussion's all about the House Bill 291, not individuals, but the position. So I've got some lights coming on, and we'll start with, is this you, Vice Chair Cummins?
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So I have just a quick thought, and I would like to make a motion as well, is that I recognize the process is going forward, and I am supportive of those changes that have been made and are contained in Substitute 3. So anyone can correct me if this motion is out of order or crazy, but I move that we support the chair in working with the bill sponsor on any additional substitutes, as long as they do not compromise the content and intent of what's contained in Substitute 3.
We have a motion and a second. We will go to discussion. Maybe I'll go first. I appreciate your support on this. It means a lot to me. We've got a lot of skin in the game. Seeing no, oh, okay. Board Member Lear.
I support Brittany's motion. I definitely trust the chair. I think you've been consistent, the chair and leadership have been consistent all along in working on this bill. I just want to be really clear that I personally have non-negotiable positions that were expressed by you. I agree with every one of those, that there has to be the ability to terminate for not following written directives and insubordination. I think that the term has to be a term that is not retroactive. The issue of the staff working for the board, I think, is an important one. I don't know that a 4-year term, 6-year term matters. I also want to state that I think no bill at all would be my druthers, because then it allows the State Board of Education as a constitutional body to manage its own employees, which I think is the most appropriate thing for the board to do. But I appreciate the board chair's efforts and the board staff efforts on this bill to very much reflect what the board has expressed to them that we feel strongly about. So I think that's important. The last thing I want to say is that over and over we've had a discussion about this position being unique, and this is why this bill came about to begin with. I feel like all employees of the State Board of Education have unique responsibilities, strengths, weaknesses, challenges, and I feel like that's why it's important for this position to be as similar as possible as this bill allows, if the bill is going to go forward, to other employees of a similar level in the office. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Board Member Cannon.
I would like to compliment the board leadership for going forward and working on this. I differ a little bit from Carol in having worked with this for many, many years. I believe that there are some very unique talents and capabilities that are incorporated in this position. I do like the renaming of it from to beneficiary advocate. I think that really describes what this person's role is. I like that it includes an oath of office to the school children of the state of Utah. I think that's something that we'd like to see, because this involves a lot of money, and anywhere there's money, there are people seeking to divert it into other places. So I would support the motion to support this bill.
Any further questions on the motion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. Oh, what's that? Joel, are you still on the phone? No. The motion was to repeat that, was to give support to the chair to continue to work on the fourth substitute on House Bill 291 as long as we follow the intent and that of the third substitute. Okay, that was clear, and we voted on it, right? I'm trying to remember. It's getting a blur. I thought we did. So, okay, Angie, so it's back to you on updates.
Great, and actually, I'm going to turn the time to Tiffany to talk about SB 220. Did you?
Goodness. Okay. So SB 220, the Student Assessment and School Accountability Amendments Bill passed Tuesday.
Yesterday morning.
Oh yeah, yesterday morning on
concurrence. Yeah.
So there was an amendment on the House floor that for the 17-18 school year, the board would not be required to assign a school an overall rating. So I thought it might be helpful to just really quickly go over a timeline for how this would roll out, the changes in this bill. The bill requires the board to go through a standard setting process to define what each rating means from A through F, and then also to design a report card or a dashboard. So that would be taking place over the spring and early fall. And then the bill requires the board to report to the interim committee on that process and present a sample report card or dashboard. Then in September, the school accountability reports would be released based on our current system, so status quo system of letter grades and everything in September 17. Then the new assessment, that's not on this timeline, but the new assessment, ACT Aspire, would be administered in the spring of 2018. And then in the fall of 2018, the school accountability report would be released, but the bill doesn't require the board to assign ratings that year. So letter grades doesn't require the board to assign those that year. And then finally, in September 2018, would be a full report with ratings released based on the new system in the bill. So that's sort of just an overview. I don't know that it was totally clear at points in the debate when things would be happening, and so I think that's an important recognition with the letter grade debate that those would still be, we still have status quo for this fall. As far as our accountability system. So,
any questions? Seeing no lights, we'll move on.
All right, great. And the last bill we
Wait. Kathleen has a question.
So on this diagram, September 15th, 2019 or 2018? Is that 18?
19 is when for the new system with ratings and everything would be 19, September 19.
Okay, we'll move on.
All right.
Okay, wait.
New chair.
Go ahead.
I have a question. The board voted, had a rather ambiguous statement to support a certain kind of a fusion of bills, which somewhat happened. But I just want personally to say that that we're not being asked to support or vote on this, it's done. But I personally still object to grading schools. I don't want, personally, I can't speak for the board, but I want going forward to say that it would be my effort moving forward to take the grades away altogether in working on this and doing what the bill requires us to do. I am not saying I'm comfortable with grading schools. I just wanted to make that statement, and then because I don't want to be accused as board members of being disingenuous or dishonest in working now, doing what we have to do, because I still would be working and getting rid of those grades for 2029, as well as 2018 or 19. So, thanks.
Thank you. Board Member Cummins, and then Board Member Ellis.
This one?
You.
Is it this one?
Yes.
So, and I just want to speak to Board Member Lear's thoughts, is that based on that motion that was made at our last meeting, staff and board members did work very hard to convey that message of removing the grade. And obviously, you know, it wasn't our decision to make finally on the bill, but there was a lot of effort in that regard. So,
thank you.
Board Member Cummins already addressed my issue. I just wanted to agree with Board Member Lear that I was disappointed to see that not being removed, and I appreciate the efforts that were made to remove that portion of the bill. I'm a little bit. I don't necessarily like that it looked like we approved the final version of the board because of the bill as it was written, because it did contain that portion still, but it is what it is. So,
thank you.
All right, back to us. I was just going to give you a last update on a bill that we were tracking that did pass actually this morning around 10:30 or 11, was HB 239 Juvenile Justice Amendments. Or actually, now that I think about it, it actually could be on the concurrence calendar. I apologize. Nope, it did pass.
It's passed.
So that bill was passed as a result of recommendations made from the formation of the Juvenile Justice Working Group, that they made some recommendations for changes, and they were included in that bill. And now we'll move to some bills that are still in play that we're watching. SB 234, school turnaround. Did you want to give an update on that one, Tiffany?
Oh, sure.
Okay, and I'll pull it up here.
So we briefly talked about this one last meeting, but this one is on the House calendar, for final passage, like 20. So this bill does 5 main things. So it adds that it would be 2 consecutive school years that would lead to designation and turnaround rather than just one. It separates the determination of what the school needs from the turnaround expert responsible for providing the services. So it separates that needs assessment and root cause analysis from the turnaround expert who is providing services. It enhances the role of the local education board in the process by allocating the funds to the local education board to actually contract with the turnaround experts. It creates a teacher recruitment and retention program, which would provide matching funds to local education boards who submit a plan to address teacher recruitment and retention in these schools. And it changes the exit criteria so that improvement is measured statistically as opposed to according to improvements in ratings or letter grades. This will enable us to measure improvement independent of the changes in the accountability system that are going on. So those are the main pieces.
Any questions? We have a question first from Board Member Belknap, and then one from Board Member, who's over there in seat number 5, Reby.
I actually really like these changes, having worked with the turnaround and so on and so forth. So I would ask that we would make a motion to support this the way it is established so that it can get through, so it will be more beneficial to our schools as they're trying to be successful. That's a motion.
That's a motion. Any second? Okay. All in favor?
Oh, you gotta have
wait,
discussion.
we gotta have discussion. Sorry. I'm jumping the gun. Okay, Board Member Reby.
Thank you. Giving schools 2 years instead of 1 year is a big difference. It's great that they're going to have a chance to modify their plans. I like that you are working to retain teachers, because at these schools, I have lots of friends who work in them, and it is really a hard scenario. I also appreciate that you're working with statistical gains instead of just letter grades. So I think there are some really great changes in this, and I appreciate all the work that everybody's done to make these changes.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Ellis?
I feel uncomfortable with how many bills that we're trying to take positions on, and so I'm not going to vote to support it. I have too many questions that are unanswered, and I think as a board we need to be more careful about just supporting and whatever. I'd rather we weren't taking so many positions on bills. So I just want to make that statement. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so the ayes, will they raise their hands? Oh,
Let's go there.
Anybody on the phone? Okay, so we have Scott, Laura, Brittany, Linda, Janet, Kathleen, Carol, and Jenny.
I think it's 9.
Say that.
Yeah. Okay, that passes.
That was 9, wasn't it? 9.
Okay, so let's move on. Is there anything else? We have just a few minutes left.
Yeah, are there any bills that you are interested in discussing? The other bills that we still have going that we've been tracking are HB 231, Educator Evaluation Amendments. That's the bill that Representative Jefferson Moss is running that eliminates some of the more prescriptive requirements of the Public Human Resource Management Act, specifically around the evaluation system. That bill went through to the Senate and had a Senate committee hearing, but it is still in rules and hasn't come out on the board. So right now we'll see if it actually gets released from House rules to be put on the board.
Wait, let's go back to Board Member Hanson.
So a couple of questions. So chances are, is there something that we can do to get that out? Because we've already changed the rule, and we're hoping that would come to, so we could actually, it micromanages the districts a lot less with teacher evaluations.
At this point, what usually happens is legislators prioritize their bills, and then leadership prioritizes all the bills, and essentially they kind of give each other lists. So the House will say, this is what we want you to release from the Senate, and the Senate will say, this is what we want you to release from the House. And so the question is there anything we can do to get this taken out of Senate rules? It's actually Senate rules, I think I said House rules. Yes, we probably could express our desire to have it come out to House leadership and tell them that it is a board priority. And I think that Representative Jefferson Moss told me it is his top priority of his remaining bills that he has left that are in process. So,
okay, yeah, I think that would be helpful. One more thing that I wanted to mention. First sub SB 238. I just want the board to be aware, because after the session's over, I don't want everybody to go, we didn't know that was happening. So that takes us off, like we took the non-voting members off of our board, that takes us off the Board of Regents and UCAT. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it forms a new group, or actually a quarterly requirement, that essentially the chair and executive director type positions. So for the representative of this board would be Superintendent Dixon, and Chair Huntsman would meet along with the Commissioner of Higher Ed plus the Chair of Board of Regents, and then, similar for UCAT, and I think, I'm trying to remember if it's also workforce services, or it might just be education. And those groups, along with 2 legislators, so a House and a member of the Senate, and they are supposed to meet together quarterly to discuss education issues that affect pre-K through 6, and on to the whole system.
Okay, thank you.
But you're right, it does take those 2. You will not have seats on the Board of Regents or the UCAT Board of Trustees anymore.
Thank you. Okay.
Are there any other bills that you all would like to discuss?
Yes. Whoa, wait, let me get to the right seat number. Okay, Cannon 6. There.
Thank you. I hadn't heard of that bill, but I had an opportunity to be the liaison to UCAT for the State Board of Education. I also had an opportunity to be one of the regents assigned from the State Board to serve. And over the years that happened, I think there was a real understanding that was gained from having regents sitting on our board and UCAT members sitting on our board, and cross-pollinating all the boards, in my opinion, was a very positive thing, because I had lived through previous years of intense dissension between all of these particular boards, and fighting against one another on the Hill for education dollars and that type of thing. So I just want to say, I don't think that this is a step in the right direction. I'm sad to see that this is taking place.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, we'll go on. Oh, wait. There you go.
And I wanted to go back for a minute. Were you going someplace else?
We're going wherever you would like to go.
Okay. I wanted to go back to Representatives House Bill 239, the one on juvenile justice revisions, and see if I'm misunderstanding. Was the staff involved at all in working with the representative on this bill, or this?
Our kind of other staff at the lower levels that actually work on these programs were involved in answering technical questions and did participate, but none of the superintendency participated in those meetings, because a couple of the meetings actually took place during this meeting, and so we weren't able to participate, but Lorianne Thorpe and Steve, I can't remember his last name, Kalen, they participated, and then there were updates given to the superintendency, but they mostly were kind of tracking it and answering technical questions.
But I was really asking more in the development of the bill.
Not that I know
were
of.
they involved? I've been watching this bill. I think this, and all we can do now is hope to maybe mitigate going forward, but I guess I'm asking publicly for the staff and the superintendent to look to this representative who's always been very helpful in public education issues, because there are some considerable changes to what this means for public education, and I think it's going to take some considerable resources that are not plentiful in the bill, and I really hope that we, meaning the public education community, are not left looking bad because we're not supportive of this philosophically. I personally am very philosophically supportive. I just think it takes much more money and much more resources in the public education system than this bill really contemplates and identifies, and I'm fearful that it's going to make schools, it doesn't give the resources to schools to deal with the problems that it now shifts to those schools. So I just think publicly I wanted to state that, and if we have further juvenile justice reform, if this is the beginning, I hope that we can work with those bill sponsors before the intensity of the session to see what the real implications are for schools, because we don't have the resources to deal with severely troubled students unless they give them to us. Even though I don't want them in, I don't think it's a great place to have them in prison either. So,
Carol, I can let you know that juvenile justice under CCJJ did create a working group last June that met several times to start working on this, and so we did have some staff involved in that, but this was started about last June, I believe, and he did change. I believe the bill now says may instead of shall.
There are some changes that I thought were helpful. I just think overall it's a huge shift, and I just looked at one section that now schools can't refer students where behavior takes place off school property without thinking about the fact that that behavior could very much influence what happens on school property.
Right.
And that's, I think, unfortunate, because the school system, take the consequences for that. And I wish that had been more fully explored by more people than I know about. And if it has, great.
I believe the Victims' Rights Committee and Utah Prosecution Council worked quite a bit with him on some of those issues.
But not school people.
Yeah, there were some people from the state board, but yeah.
Not people in the schools like counselors and teachers and principals.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Okay. What time do we have this room until? Are we okay?
Yeah, the meeting is set to go till 1:30, so we're already over time, but we could stay longer, or you could move into, I think you have an executive session planned, you could move into executive session, which will be in the Olmsted room.
Okay, so we're actually, it doesn't look like anybody has any other comments or concerns. I'm looking for a motion to go into executive session. The board will move into a closed executive session for the purpose of discussing pending or reasonably imminent litigation and the character, professional competence, and physical or mental health of individuals. Okay, all in favor? And we need a roll call vote. Okay.
Who's on the phone?
Anybody on the phone? Okay, we'll start with Board Member Gravette.